It was a quiet night in Kuala Lumpur. The humid air hung still above the glowing runway lights. Flight MH370, a Boeing 777 bound for Beijing, stood ready for takeoff. Inside, 239 passengers settled into their seats, unaware that within hours every radar, every signal, every trace of them would vanish into the dark. Inside the cockpit sat Captain Zahiri Ahmed Shah, a seasoned pilot with more than 18,000 hours in the air. Calm, precise, methodical, the kind of man passengers trusted without question. Beside him, First Officer Farik Hamid, young, confident, on one of his final training flights before full certification. Together, they prepared Flight MH370 for a routine journey from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, a 6-hour overnight route crossing the South China Sea. In the cabin behind them, 227 passengers settled in, families, students, business travelers, all heading toward a new day that would never come. The safety briefing echoed softly through the cabin, seatbelts clicked, and engines roared to life. At 12:42 a.m., the Boeing 777 lifted gracefully into the night sky. The lights of Kuala Lumpur faded below, leaving behind only silence and the hum of flight, unaware that this ordinary takeoff marked the beginning of one of the greatest mysteries in modern history. Flight MH370 climbed steadily through the humid night air, heading northeast over the South China Sea. In the control room below, air traffic controllers watched the radar screen, a tiny green dot labeled MAS 370 moving smoothly toward its next waypoint. Everything was normal. The crew reported their altitude, the passengers relaxed, and the hum of the engines filled the cabin like a lullaby. At 12:58 a.m., the plane was cruising at 35,000 feet. Outside, the world was silent, just the whisper of wind brushing against the fuselage. In the cockpit, Captain Zahiri adjusted the heading. Farik noted the time. Routine, calm, predictable. Down on the ground, technicians monitored hundreds of flights crossing Southeast Asia that night, yet none would soon puzzle them more than this one. At 1:07 a.m., the last automatic data burst from MH370. A car's system was sent, confirming everything was still fine. In Beijing, families were asleep, expecting early calls from loved ones upon arrival. The weather was clear and the world for that fleeting hour seemed peaceful. Then, 1:19 a.m., a radio transmission. The controller's voice crackled. Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh Control. Captain Zahiri replied, calm as ever. Good night, Malaysian 370. Those 7 words would become haunting, because just moments later the plane vanished from civilian radar. No distress call, no squawk, no sound. 1 second it was there, bright and steady. The next, nothing but an empty screen and the low hum of static. In that silence, the night changed forever. 1:21 a.m. The radar screen in Kuala Lumpur flickered once and the green dot labeled MH370 was gone. Controllers leaned forward, checking instruments, refreshing data. Nothing. The plane had vanished without a trace. They tried radio contact again. Malaysian 370, do you read? Silence. Only static replied. At 1:30 a.m., Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh Center awaited handover, but MH370 never arrived. They too called again and again. No response. In the control room, confusion spread like ripples in still water. Was it a technical glitch, a power loss? Controllers scanned the airspace. Dozens of flights crossed Southeast Asia that night, yet only one, the Boeing 777, had vanished. Down below, emergency protocols activated. Lines buzzed between Malaysia, Vietnam, and Singapore. Each side insisted, your radar should have it, ours shows nothing. Meanwhile, in the skies, somewhere over the South China Sea, the truth was unfolding. Military radar, operating on a different frequency, caught something strange. A faint signal moving west. The aircraft had turned back across the Malay Peninsula, flying in the opposite direction of its intended path. Controllers were stunned. No civilian flight should change course like that without clearance. 1:52 a.m., the signal strengthened briefly near Penang. Then it faded again. The system logged a final sweep before total silence. In the following minutes, chaos erupted. Coordinators debated if the aircraft might have crashed, been hijacked, or lost all electrical systems. But none of it fit. No mayday, no debris, no explosion, only absence. On the ground, families slept peacefully, unaware that somewhere in the sky above, 239 people had slipped beyond reach. By 2:30 a.m., rescue authorities were alerted. 2 hours later, search and rescue aircraft were airborne, scouring the night ocean for a plane that had seemingly erased itself. What began as a simple flight was now a ghost in the sky, unseen, unheard, and beyond explanation. As dawn broke over Southeast Asia, the world awoke to confusion. Flight MH370 had vanished. No mayday, no debris, no trace, only silence. At first, authorities hesitated, assuming a lost signal, a diversion, perhaps a landing at some forgotten airfield. But hour after hour, the truth became harder to ignore. The aircraft was gone. Within 24 hours, a massive search operation began, one of the largest in history. 26 countries joined forces. Satellites were retasked. Ships, aircraft, and submarines combed thousands of square miles of ocean. In Malaysia, families gathered at the airport, clinging to hope as officials read updates from paper sheets that said nothing new. In Beijing, crowds filled the arrival hall, faces pale under fluorescent lights, clutching signs with names that would never be called. On the open sea, aircraft flew grid patterns over endless blue. Crews peered through binoculars for any sign, a floating cushion, a slick of oil, a reflection of metal. Each report brought a wave of false hope. A radar blip, a heat signature, a shadow on the water. Every lead collapsed into the same cold silence. Then came the storm, wind howling, rain cutting across the decks of search ships. Still, they pressed on. Pilots flew beyond exhaustion. Sailors scanned until their eyes blurred. Yet the sea revealed nothing. The questions multiplied. If the plane had turned back, why? Who was in control? Was it mechanical failure or something deliberate? As days turned into weeks, pressure mounted. News networks broadcast maps and theories around the clock. Experts debated fuel range, radar pings, possible crash zones. But no one could answer the only question that mattered. Where is MH370? At 8:19 a.m., 8 hours after takeoff, an automatic handshake signal reached a satellite orbiting high above the Indian Ocean. It was faint but real. That signal suggested the plane had kept flying, far beyond where anyone had imagined, south into the emptiness of the Indian Ocean. It was the first clue, and yet it only deepened the mystery. Days turned into weeks. The search grid expanded across oceans, but still nothing. No wreckage, no bodies, no answers. In Kuala Lumpur, the families gathered every morning in the same hotel ballroom, waiting for updates that never changed. A table filled with bottled water, tissues, and fading hope. Officials stood before them with blank expressions, reading statements filled with uncertainty. In Beijing, at the arrival hall, the signboard still read Flight MH370 delayed. People refused to leave, sitting on the cold floor, holding photos of loved ones, whispering prayers into the noise of cameras. Outside, the world watched. Candlelight vigils filled city squares from Malaysia to Australia. Strangers wept for faces they had never met. Children placed paper cranes along fences, each one marked with a name that would never return home. The media turned the mystery into noise, theories, conspiracies, endless speculation. But for the families, it wasn't mystery. It was absence, the kind that hollowed every minute of every day. Some refused to give up. They called phone numbers still ringing, checked social media accounts still online. Others stared at the sky each night, imagining the plane still somewhere out there, circling, waiting to land. As days passed, the government shifted from search to explanation. They called it an accident, declared all aboard lost. But grief is not something that ends with a press release. It lingers in the faces of parents who still set a place at the dinner table, in the children who ask why the sea never gives back what it takes. In Malaysia, one mother held a small photograph to her chest and whispered, "He promised he'd call me when he landed." In that moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath, listening to the sound of her voice, breaking the silence that had swallowed Flight 370. The ocean stretched endless and indifferent. Beneath those waves perhaps lay answers no one would ever find. Above them, only wind and the echo of names carried away by the tide. As the weeks passed, the focus shifted from rescue to investigation. What could make a modern Boeing 777 with redundant systems and constant communication links simply vanish? Investigators traced the final known path using data from a British satellite company, Inmarsat. Their engineers discovered something remarkable: a series of automated handshakes between the aircraft and a satellite orbiting far above the Earth. Those signals formed a faint digital trail, a curved arc stretching across the Indian Ocean, known today as the Seventh Arc. According to calculations, the plane had flown for nearly 7 more hours after contact was lost, until its fuel finally ran dry somewhere in the Southern Ocean. But how? If there was fire, why was there no distress call? If it was hijacked, why no demands? If it was a pilot's suicide, why fly so far into nowhere? Every theory raised more questions than answers. In simulators, experts recreated possible scenarios: electrical failure, decompression, deliberate diversion. None fit perfectly. Then came rumors. Some said the aircraft was taken to a secret base. Others believed it was shot down by mistake. Conspiracies spread faster than evidence. In the background, governments withheld radar data, citing national security. Families demanded transparency. Scientists published reports filled with numbers, graphs, and probabilities. But still, the truth slipped through like water between fingers. 2 years later, fragments began to wash ashore, pieces of wing and fuselage found on distant beaches in Madagascar, Reunion, and Mozambique. Each was confirmed to belong to MH370. Yet the main wreckage, the cockpit, the black boxes, the answers, remained lost beneath thousands of meters of ocean. Some investigators believe the plane glided down under human control. Others insist it spiraled into the sea at high speed. But every theory shares one haunting certainty. For 7 hours, MH370 continued to fly, silent, unseen, alone, across the world's most isolated stretch of ocean. It was not a crash in a moment. It was a disappearance in slow motion. The ocean still moves, indifferent and eternal. Waves rise and fall over the same waters where Flight MH370 vanished. Years have passed, but for the families, time never moved forward. Every sunrise feels like the same day that never ended. Every night, the same unanswered question. Somewhere beneath these waves lies the truth, perhaps buried under miles of sand or drifting in the dark currents of the Indian Ocean. But maybe the truth is no longer what matters. What remains are the lives that once filled that cabin, the laughter, the stories, the dreams left suspended in the air. 239 souls frozen in time, carried away by the endless blue. They remind us of how fragile we are and how vast the world can be. From the surface, the sea looks calm again. But beneath it, it still keeps a secret that only the silence understands. The search for MH370 became more than a mission. It became a symbol of humanity's need to understand the unknown. And so, every time a plane crosses the sky, someone looks up and whispers a silent prayer for those who never made it home. Flight MH370, gone but never forgotten.